Okay.
We're
Hello.
live. Welcome.
Nine, right? So we're starting on the law of relativity.
Mhm.
We are clear and concise and even keeled.
Welcome back to part 3 of the 12 Universal Laws. This is our last part. We have 4 more to throw at you. So let's get started.
Yeah, if you've made it to the third part, kudos to you. If you're jumping in on the third part, go back and listen to the first part and the second part because they all build off of one another.
It's all going to make a lot more sense in order, even though they are all connected and you don't necessarily have to look at them in a particular order. I feel like just the way we've been talking about them, we'll mention things from a previous episode. So
yeah. Go ahead and just start from the beginning. But if you're rebellious, because I know I can be that way, and I'm like, no, you can't tell me what to do.
It'll still all make sense.
It'll all make sense.
Do what feels right.
Yes.
Maybe you just need to hear the last 4.
Yeah, maybe that is true. You will know what is best for you. All right, well, jumping right in, we're going to get started with number 9, the law of relativity.
So this basically states that experiences are not good nor bad, they're neutral. It's us that likes to label things based on our experiences, if things are good or bad.
Yeah, your reality is going to be based on your perception of it. So this law reminds us that, you know, everything, all experiences, which is hard for our human brains to really understand and wrap around this concept of that everything is neutral, because we immediately want to create purpose and reason for things, and we're like, there's so many things in this world that can't be neutral.
Yeah.
But when you go back to the law of oneness, everything is one and everything is happening for the better evolution of all of us. So if certain things are happening in this world for us and, you know, in our lives for us to learn from, it may be extremely uncomfortable in the moment. But on some level, it's completely neutral, and we're the ones that are perceiving it as bad.
Yeah, the universe does not perceive good and bad. Again, things just are or they are not. And so the more we can kind of shift to that, and I know as humans with egos, like I don't think we'll ever be 100% there, but just having the realization that everyone is having a separate existence and everyone is going to see things in a unique way, and just being open to all ideas and not holding on to the expectations. I know for me, I started noticing this probably within like the last year. I don't know what clicked in my brain, but I've realized that there have been so many situations in my life that I've labeled as bad, that once you gave it time and things evolved and shifted, I realized, oh, that was actually technically a good thing because of the growth or the lesson or whatever. So before labeling something, just let it be. Just sit with it for a little while, because you never know what's going to happen in the end that it's going to change your perception of what it really is.
Yeah, we use our emotions, our own thoughts, and our experiences to judge a situation. And I think that's why humans have gotten so far on this planet, because we are so confident and we're like, I know the answer. Like so much of life as humans is like, I know better than anyone else. Or if you just look at like how we're existing and treating the planet, it's like, I'm just going to ignore all of these warning signs that, you know, Mother Nature is giving us when it comes to, you know, my first thought is like the way we're treating the environment. It's like, no. I know what's best. I'm going to keep using all this plastic. I'm going to keep using, you know, plastic. Well, you know, all the natural resources, rather than, and that's just all coming from our own judgment, right? We're perceiving this as, we're perceiving that even as good. Some people are perceiving that as good because, you know, we're creating a physical life with these things and creating, you know, modern day society. But at the same time, some people perceive that as bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why our society is so divided now, because our opinions are able to be so known. Like we have all been, you know, had separate experiences. We've all had separate opinions on things, but I think in this day and age, we're allowed to tell everyone about them. and then everyone else is allowed to be like, no, that's not true, you're wrong, and it's hard. I mean, I feel that way about so many things where I'm like, no, that's absolutely 100% wrong. What that person is doing is, there's no way it can be perceived as right. But you can't say that for sure. And it's just, you haven't lived their life. So you don't know how they see it. You don't know where they're coming from at the end of the day. So you kind of just have to hold empathy, compassion. And if you don't agree, that's fine, because everyone, we have free will. We're allowed to have our own opinions, but just understanding, like, no one is right or wrong. Nothing is good or bad. Like,
Yeah. Right. Like you said, we're all learning based on our own life experiences.
Mhm.
So, and then as humans, we try and make sense of things, and we compare situations and experiences to one another. And then that's how we deem things as good or bad. So it's through that comparison that we can get worked up over things. And in reality, I mean, there's definitely some things that are, you need to get worked up over, but how many things in life do we get worked up over that really aren't that big of a deal?
Mhm.
That we really could be coming at a situation from a more neutral place
Yeah.
and trying to find understanding rather than trying to prove that we're right.
And at the end of the day, there's so many things that we do not have the power to change around us. And again, we talked about this last episode. The only power you really have to control is of yourself and your mind and your thoughts and your perceptions. So it's going to be a lot less uncomfortable. And in my opinion, I think a lot more gets done when two people come at a situation or an issue with an open mind or a willingness to be neutral, versus just butting heads when you're both on complete opposite sides and you're not willing to budge. I don't think anything ever will happen.
Yeah.
No positive change will come out of that.
Yeah. I think, conflict doesn't always need to be seen as like this scary thing. I think conflict can be really healthy. And it, like what Danielle said, like when you come at a situation from like a neutral place and you've had a disagreement, or, you want to bring something up because it's not sitting right with you. If both people come from like a neutral, open place, then you can like come at the situation with understanding, try and figure out why each person is feeling the way they are, and then hopefully, either compromise or just come out of the situation like with more understanding. And you can be like, oh, and if you are a self-aware person who's wanting to learn and grow and evolve as a human, then you will come out of that situation knowing how you can better yourself so this thing doesn't have to happen again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, coming back to like the most basic understanding of this concept, like, light only exists because we compare it to the dark. So you think of that, things only exist because we have other things to compare it to, and that's just, again, helps our human brain make sense of things. But if we can just take a step back from that and take a higher arching perspective, I think we can see that things aren't always black and white. There's this like gray area. And I think one thing I hope to do through this podcast is help people understand the gray. That sounds really weird, but I feel like there's so much growth that can happen when people don't just look at like the opposing sides of things and just understand that there's like somewhere in the middle that can exist that's not as extreme. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I think, I feel like this one's definitely very like related to human nature as far as the, relativity. It's like it just, I think it comes down to neutrality, really. It's like, how would we all react differently if we didn't pick a side immediately? Yes or no, good or bad. It's like, what if we were just neutral to the situation? How much more growth would happen, and like positive growth where we would figure out what is best for us. It comes down to having compassion and understanding. I often think about, we can think our day, we can have a day that's going the wrong way, where everything's going wrong. And maybe you're late for work, maybe you got a ticket, maybe, I don't know, whatever you could think of that's gone wrong in your day has gone wrong in your day. But something that can immediately bring you back is thinking that your worst days could totally be someone's best days. Like, there's definitely someone in this world who would be happy to switch places with you.
Yeah.
And the second you think of that, when you're having a bad day and you're in a negative headspace or you're feeling bad for yourself in victimhood, that should bring you back immediately where you're like, oh, I should be grateful for that parking ticket. Like I get to live in a place where I have a car, where, I'm able to be in community, just like all the things you can list off that even on your worst days, you're still living someone's best day.
Absolutely. And law of transmutation, transmuting that frustration, anger, anything into gratitude is like the best possible thing to do. Because at the end of the day, like there are so many people going through so many things. And when you realize how grateful you are for the life you have, like we talked about manifesting, the only way you're going to manifest more is if you can sit in appreciation with what you already have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then comparison is also something that will take you out of feeling that neutral state. If you are constantly comparing your life to other people and looking at the things that you don't have and looking at the things that you do have, that's just completely unfair to you. And, comparison is the thief of joy. You're going to feel just really icky and bad about yourself because you know nothing about that person you're comparing your life to. You don't know their lived experiences. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
But I bet you there's certain things that they've experienced that you haven't and that you maybe don't want to have experienced. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than doing that, look at your own life and find things to be grateful for. It's really as simple as that. It's like it just brings all of us back to center and to just being calm, being grateful. I think this is how meditation can really help, is like that meditation really helps you find that neutral state of being. And I feel like you come out of meditation and you're just so calm and peaceful and centered, and you're like, I can handle anything. Let's talk about it.
Totally.
I have a quote by Oprah Winfrey that says, if you look at what you have in life, you'll always have more. If you look at what you don't have in life, you'll never have enough. So it's kind of like the law of attraction that we were talking about. Like attracts like. If you're going to be focusing on the bad stuff in life, you're going to get more of that.
Yeah.
If you're going to look at the grateful stuff you're grateful for in life, you're going to get more of that. So it's like a mirror, all of this is like a mirror to life. It's like, it's crazy. What you're feeling on the inside will literally show up on your outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some advice I have is, shifting a bad situation to another perspective we went over this in the law of transmutation. It's like, this is why they all are so connected. So when you find yourself in that place of, good or bad, and you're needing to find that neutral standing point, apply the law of transmutation to then shift your energy slowly but surely to find that center again, where you can look at this from a different perspective and have better understanding.
Yeah, if you're in a situation where you're really feeling a lot of negative emotions come up, pick 3 things in that moment that you're grateful for. That can be really hard when you are just wanting to kind of focus on those negative feelings or anger or sadness or whatever. But even just getting yourself out of it enough to be like, oh, even in this shitty moment, there are things I can look around in the room that I'm in and still pick out 3 things that I'm grateful for.
Yeah. And if that's too hard, just try and find neutrality. Like we've said, I'm breathing. I am alive.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what is this teaching me also, and then from there, because then it's less sticky, right? Then it's kind of like a game again where you're like, how can I figure out what the lesson is in this? Then it gives that moment purpose rather than just like torturing you.
And it allows you to become more open-minded in that moment. And so you don't feel the need to go black or white, because that's where you're in the gray. You're like, oh, this is good nor bad. What is it? It's a lesson. It's, it's something in between. It's not as like, oh, I need to go to these like far emotions. It's like, oh no, just coming back to like that balance.
All right. Law number 10 is the law of polarity. So this states that everything in life has an opposite. For example, good and evil, love and fear, warmth and cold.
Yeah, it's these things that cannot exist without the other. And so paradoxically, these opposing forces are like one of whole. Like think of yin yang. It's like this one entity, but there are 2 opposing forces that make up the one, if that makes sense.
Or like a coin.
Yeah, a coin, think of that. It's like you have the coin, but you have these two opposing sides. And when you're flipping a coin, you have this chance that, oh, maybe it's going to be heads, maybe it's going to be tails. There's always like that possibility, but they are opposites, but also one thing.
Mm-hmm. You know, all contrast in life brings more clarity. So you can be thinking like, why do we have good and evil? Why is there positive, negative? And it's like, that's just life. That is the human experience. Like we said, these laws are based off of observations that, you know, ancient cultures have made just on how the universe exists,
Mhm.
how it functions. And this is a part of the functioning is the law of polarity. So if you think about, you know, a moment in your life that has brought you extreme sorrow or sadness, those moments usually make the joyful, happy moments so much sweeter, where
Mhm.
you're able to appreciate those moments so much more.
Yeah.
And if you've ever met anyone who's gone through hardship and come out on the other side and they are not in a victimhood state and where they're in a place of just like fully realizing how precious and sacred life is. And you kind of like, there's plenty of people in my life where I'm like, wow, like look at how they exist. Look at how much they love. Look at how much they live because they're not living from a place of paranoia or fear or victimhood, like I said. So it's just kind of this weird, twisted concept where it's
Mhm.
like those more contrasty, darker moments make those light moments so much sweeter.
Yeah, I think there's a part of us, I know I've always been quite an optimist. So it's like, oh, I wish every day was sunshine and roses and the sun was out and everything worked out perfectly. But how fucking boring would that be if
Mhm.
if perfection was your everyday? Why would we even be here? There would be nothing to learn. There would be no appreciation for it because it's just the way it is. But it's those days like I think about where we live, like it's so beautiful here, and we'll have like these gorgeous kind of like gloomy, foggy day. And instead of being like, oh, it's so gross, it's like, oh my gosh, when it's sunny again, I'm going to appreciate it so much more.
Yeah. The long, cold winters really make you appreciate the summertime
Yeah.
and like the sun and the warmth so much more. You know, a great example of this also is all of us during 2020, 2021 of COVID and feeling super isolated and alone and, you know, not being able to socialize with our friends or go out in public. And it's like the second things started to open up again and you started to reach out to your friends and hang out with people. I know for me, it made those moments so much more sweeter and I was so much more present and aware. And I was like, wow, like I really
Mhm.
was taking all of this for granted.
It's so true. I used to go to a lot of concerts and music festivals, and I always kind of took those for granted. And you'd have those moments where you'd be watching like your favorite band, and you're like, kind of like maybe it's a song that you don't like as much, and you kind of like spacing out, and then you get back into it. And I remember the first festival we went to after COVID, I was so fucking present the entire time. I was like, I don't even care if I like the song, I don't like the song. I'm just fucking happy to be
I
here.
know.
And that was like the energy behind it. But I would have never gotten to that point if I wasn't able to do that thing.
Yeah. Another great example is if you've been in good health and then you get sick and you're feeling super ill and unwell, and you're just like, I will never take my good health for granted again.
Yeah.
And there's so many moments like that where we cycle through, where we kind of become stagnant and taking like again taking things for granted and you're just you know this is just how life is la di da
Mhm.
and then life you know sometimes has to shake you awake and be like wake up like
Mhm.
you really need to value these things and appreciate these things so through the polarity and the contrast we can really learn those lessons which
Yeah.
whoo you know and that's when you use the
Easier said
law
than
of
done.
relativity where you can hopefully come at these situations with some neutral
Yeah.
you know viewpoints and you don't get so upset and feeling you know personally like attacked by the universe when something doesn't go your way but really it's
Yeah.
like okay what do I need to learn here what do I need to focus on what is this showing me
Yeah. Absolutely. I think another way we can think of the polarity in our own lives is through emotions. And one thing I think we've both recently come to the realization of is emotions like to share space. Like it's very rare that you're feeling two emotions at the exact same level at the same time. There's always one that's going to take precedence, that's going to be stronger. So if you are focused on a lower vibrational emotion like fear, sadness, anger, there's going to be no room for the opposite emotion, which is like joy or positivity. But on the other side of the coin, if you are focused on those higher vibrational feelings, you're not going to have room to feel all those other negative feelings. So something to think about with that. It's like focusing on one side of the coin, and you don't leave room in that moment in your mind for the negative emotions.
Yeah. And I think, this is how you activate the law of polarity. That if you are feeling, a lower vibrational emotion and you're feeling in just not so good. So let's, use fear, for example. If you're feeling fearful about something in your life, what is the opposite thing of that? And if you can't hold space, which is actually like a superpower, and like I'm so grateful that we can't hold space for both at the same time, even though it can feel suffocating when you're in the negative emotion. But if you flip the coin and you see what's on the other side, so maybe opposite of fear is what?
Love.
Love. Love, excitement. Then you can lean into that more. And that's what's cool about it, is like you're kind of immediately, I don't want to say deleting, but you're starting to transmute the energy through the polarity. It's like, again, these are all so connected. It's crazy. It's like, okay, I'm going to, use the law of polarity to know that there's an opposite of this emotion. Now I'm going to use the law of transmutation to now transmute that emotion, because I know that's what's best for my vibration, because I know that's how I'm going to attract the things I want into my life. It's like, oh my goodness gracious, my brain could explode.
Yeah. And so when you're happy, there's always the potential to be sad, but also when you're sad, there's always potential to be happy. So just understand that's just a part of life. There's that flux, there's that change. But I think that's a really comforting thing when you are feeling sad or lost or stuck, just knowing this is going to shift. This is going to change. This is not my forever.
Yeah.
There is something that exists on the opposite side of this that's much more pleasant.
Yeah. And those negative emotions have purpose. Like I know it's so much more comfortable to just avoid all of the negative or the scary or the dark things in life, but they have a purpose and they're meant to be felt because they're trying to tell you something. So we're not saying ignore these negative emotions and just like bypass everything you're feeling. It's important to feel them and work through them. And then where the law of polarity comes into play is that you're going to get out of it and that there is an opposite to this. So you're not going to be stuck. It's important to feel it and to process it and to go through it, but you're not going to be stuck there.
Yeah.
This is a moment for you to learn from, and for you to expand on your own personal and emotional growth.
Yeah. It's all temporary, good and bad.
Yep. Feel those feels and then transmute those feels. All right. Number 11 is the law of rhythm. This is the idea that nothing is permanent. Energy is always in motion. And these motions is what creates cycles and patterns.
So think of like the seasons. Like there's always this cycle. We go through spring and then we go through summer and then we go through fall and we go through winter and that comes back around. So everything is always ebbing and flowing. Again, it goes along with what we just talked about. Like nothing is permanent. All of these things exist. That's not just going to be one thing all the time, good or bad.
Yeah. Examples of this is like Danielle said, changing season, the moon and its phases, just, our 24-hour cycle from day to night, and caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And then the most intense one of all is life itself, birth to death, that whole cycle in between.
So I like to think of the law of rhythm like a pendulum. So think about like a pendulum swinging back and forth and back and forth. And we can think of the law of polarity, what we just talked about, is like the most extreme ends of the pendulum swinging. And then the cycles are like what's in that middle. of like the ebbing and the flowing. But if that kind of helps make sense of like, before we were talking about like the far extreme ends, light, dark, and now we're kind of just talking about like the patterns and the cycles in between those extreme things.
Is there hammering going on? Is it outside? I like hear hammering. Do you not hear it?
Where's it coming from?
Is that in our house?
I don't know. Do you want me to go check?
Yeah. BRB.